So, let's talk about Reddit. You've probably heard it called the front page of the internet, and for good reason. It's this massive, sprawling digital city with over 100,000 active communities. But here's the thing. Underneath that vibrant ecosystem, there's a fundamental conflict, a civil war, really, that's been raging for years. And now that Reddit is a public company, that conflict is threatening its very future.
Okay, check out this number. Over 8,000. That's not just a random figure. It represents the sheer scale of a rebellion. In 2023, this number became the symbol of a user revolt that, honestly, brought Reddit to its knees.
For a few days, huge parts of the internet's front page just went dark. They vanished. But this wasn't some random flare-up. Nope. It was the eruption of this really deep-seated tension that has been brewing for more than a decade. It's a fight over labor, over value, and ultimately over control.
And that brings us to the central question we're digging into here. What if the very thing that made Reddit so powerful, its decentralized, user-run communities, is also the source of its most existential threat? To really get what's going on with Reddit's crisis, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning, where this whole kind of unstable system was created almost by accident.
The origin story is pretty classic Silicon Valley stuff. You have two college roommates, Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian. They pitch an idea to the legendary incubator Y Combinator, and they get rejected. But the founder, Paul Graham, he liked them, just not their idea. He told them to build the front page of the web, and poof, Reddit was born. It got acquired super fast by Condé Nast, but the most important moment, the real pivot, came in 2008.
That's when they introduced the subreddit. And let me tell you, this was an accidental stroke of genius. It took Reddit from being just one single page and turned it into a whole universe of niche communities. It could scale infinitely. But, and this is a big but, this amazing innovation came with a hidden cost. It embedded a fundamental reliance on free, volunteer labor deep into Reddit's DNA.
So this all happened during a period that's been called benign neglect. Basically, its corporate owner, Condé Nast, didn't really know what to do with Reddit, so they kind of just left it alone. This power vacuum is what allowed that community-led structure to really flourish. But it also cemented the platform's core contradiction, a for-profit company built entirely on the backs of an unpaid workforce.
So for years and years, Reddit got its most essential service. We're talking moderation and community management for free. And, well, as you can imagine, that was bound to lead to a massive labor dispute.
Now let's take a look at the business itself. It is overwhelmingly dependent on advertising. What that means is Reddit makes its money by selling ads against the attention and the content being generated inside these communities, the very same communities run by those unpaid volunteers. And this monetization gap right here, it really shows you the pressure they're under. Reddit's average revenue per user, or ARPU as it's known, is just a fraction of Meta's. As a public company, the pressure to close that gap is immense, and that forces them to try and squeeze more and more value out of the platform. This pressure has directly led to two major rebellions. The 2015 blackout was more of a social conflict, right? It was about respect. It got triggered when they fired a really key employee who was kind of the bridge to the community. But the 2023 protest, that was different. It was a purely economic conflict. It was a direct response to a business decision that made it way harder for moderators to do their unpaid work.
The tension really came to a head with comments like this from CEO Steve Huffman. He called the powerful moderators landed gentry, which, as you can guess, many saw as deeply dismissive. It just highlighted this massive disconnect between the corporate leadership and the actual people who build and maintain the platform's value.
What's really interesting is that there's a classic economic theory that perfectly explains Reddit's recurring crisis. It's called the tragedy of the commons.
The theory is actually pretty simple. Imagine a shared pasture, right? A piece of land everyone can use. Every single herder is incentivized to add more and more of their own cattle because, hey, they get all the benefit while the cost of overgrazing is shared by everyone. Eventually, the pasture gets destroyed and everybody loses.
So if we apply this to Reddit, the commons is the quality of the discussion itself. The herders are Reddit Inc., who are looking for ad revenue, and also users who are looking for karma. And the stewards, the ones protecting this commons from all the spam and toxicity, well, that's the unpaid moderators.
This framework just explains the problem so perfectly. Reddit's entire system incentivizes the herders to extract as much value as they can, while placing the entire burden of stewardship on a volunteer workforce. So the big question is, how can the platform possibly escape a tragedy that seems baked right into its very design?
So what's the solution? Well, there's this forward-looking thesis that proposes a really radical idea.
Stop managing communities like a commons and start empowering them like businesses.
The core idea here is to professionalize the commons. The proposal is to transform Reddit's top communities into what are being called digital guilds. What this really means is reframing moderators from unpaid janitors into entrepreneurs and true partners in the platform's success.
And this whole idea builds on three main pillars. First, you empower the mods. Give the top ones pro-level tools and, crucially, a cut of the revenue. Second, you help them monetize. Let them build their own little businesses with things like subscriptions and e-commerce. And third, you structure the knowledge. Use AI to turn all that community wisdom into a valuable, searchable asset.
And here's the kicker: the financial incentive. This strategy creates a direct path to closing that big monetization gap we saw earlier. See, by empowering communities to create more value, the entire platform becomes more valuable, which increases the revenue per user for absolutely everyone involved.
This model, it finally solves the core conflict. It aligns the incentives of the company, the creators, and the users. And in doing so, it builds a truly sustainable competitive advantage.
This quote just frames the strategic choice for Reddit's leadership so perfectly. They can keep going down the current path, basically managing a slow decline that's caused by constant conflict and burnout, or they can choose to build something completely new, a true digital commonwealth.
And that leaves us with one final, really provocative question. As a publicly traded company, with all the pressures that come with it, is it even possible for Reddit to build this kind of true partnership with its users?
I mean, that's the central dilemma, isn't it? Will that relentless pressure for quarterly growth from Wall Street force it to just strip mine the commons for short-term gain, fulfilling the tragedy that seems to be coded right into its DNA? The answer to that is going to define not just the future of Reddit, but potentially the future of all community-led platforms online.